West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Up front tonight, the QAnon warning. CNN tonight obtaining an FBI threat assessment sent to lawmakers, warning them that the conspiracy's followers may carry out more acts of violence as they move from serving as, quote, digital soldiers to taking real-world action. And according to the FBI, the group may want to harm, and I quote, perceived members of the cabal, such as Democrats and other political opposition. And we've already seen this play out by the insurrectionists, many of whom had ties to QAnon on January 6th, where rioters, as just one example, demanded to hunt down Nancy Pelosi.
Can I speak to Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming, bitch!
Nancy! Oh, Nancy! Nancy! Where are you, Nancy? We're looking for you, Nancy!
This warning comes after QAnon followers have for months talked about a Myanmar-style coup in the United States. Here's what some of them told Ardoni O'Sullivan at a Trump rally.
It was a false election.
So,
and they took over, and that's what happened. The military took over.
That could possibly happen here, possibly. If the military is in control.
That's what they're working towards.
Would you think that's what could happen?
That's what I think.
Would you like to see it happen?
Absolutely.
I would like to see it happen.
Really?
Yes.
You know why? Because the election was stolen from us.
The military is doing their own investigation, and at the right time, they're going to be restoring the republic with Trump as president.
And Trump allies, like his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, a retired Army lieutenant general in the United States of America, have stirred up these kinds of things, QAnon crowds, with comments like this.
I want to know why what happened in Myanmar can't happen here.
You know, no reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason.
No reason. I mean, it should happen. No reason. Flynn, though, suddenly is trying to rewrite history, saying that he wasn't endorsing a coup. But of course, you hear the tape. It speaks for itself. One prominent QAnon believer with more than 70,000 followers writing online about General Flynn's comments, quote, General Flynn says the quiet part out loud. Well, that's accurate. Even as the FBI warns of more violence, some Republicans refuse still to accept the reality of what happened on January 6th. Listen to Senator Ron Johnson.
We've seen plenty of video of people in the Capitol, and they weren't rioting. It doesn't look like an armed insurrection when you have people that breach the Capitol, and I don't condone it, but they're staying within the rope lines in the rotunda. That's not what an armed insurrection would look like.
Well, what does an armed insurrection look like? Well, that's what happened, I guess. I don't know what he calls that. Well, there's plenty of video to prove the reality. Well, Congressman Clyde, you may remember him because last month he equated the January 6th events to a normal tourist visit. He said, if you didn't know it was what it was, you would have been confused. It was just tourists. Well, he dodged CNN's question when pressed about that today.
A lot of those allies are themselves pretty rattled by what happened on January 6th, an attempted overturning of your election. And they may still be alarmed by the continued hold that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party and the rise of nationalist figures like him around the world. What do you say to those allies?
It is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism has happened. And it is disappointing that so many of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, who I know better, have been reluctant to take on, for example, an investigation because they're worried about being primaried.
And that was President Biden at a press conference today. He was asked about this very issue in Brussels at a press conference because of some of those Republicans, the vast majority of those Republicans who have downplayed the events of that day. Josh Campbell is out front live in Los Angeles with more details on this FBI warning. And Josh, I know you have been talking to your sources in law enforcement and security experts tonight. How seriously are they taking these concerns about QAnon taking action?
Well, Aaron, up until this point, FBI Director Christopher Wray has said that the Bureau is not investigating the movement QAnon, but they are certainly investigating individual adherents. And according to this new FBI memo obtained by our colleague Zach Cohen, in which the Bureau talks about their concern that some of these actors could actually move to violence, the FBI is certainly likely to have additional suspects that they will have to investigate. Now, for our viewers who may not understand the nuts and bolts of this fringe conspiracy theory movement, it's largely been based on this notion that this mysterious figure Q is going to expose all kinds of government corruption. And to now, what these adherents have been doing is saying, trust the plan, trust Q. But what the FBI says in this warning is what is concerning them is that these digital foot soldiers will not just espouse their beliefs, but may actually move to violence. They're becoming allegedly frustrated that all of these premonitions, all of these predictions that this mysterious leader has come up with have fallen apart. This idea that the Democrats and the media and those in government are running this cabal of pedophiles. And I can tell you, I've covered a number of demonstrations over the last year. I engaged with some of these folks. You ask them to show you proof of what they say, and they turn around on you and say, well, give us proof that this does not exist. So you can see it just leads you down this really dark rabbit hole. But what the FBI is concerned about is that you have these people who may, because of their frustration, now go out and try to act with violence. And finally, I'll say I was just messaging with a federal agent a short time ago about this. And what she said is that we ignore these groups at our peril. She described a lot of these adherents as what they call injustice collectors or grievance collectors, people that are just, it's thus them against the world. But of course, what is concerning law enforcement is all it takes is one person predisposed to violence to possibly cause something very deadly, a very serious issue. Very serious. All right, Josh, thank you very much. And I think so well said. When you give someone, prove to me, they just say, well, prove to me that it isn't. Right? It's pretty incredible and part of the deepest part of this problem. Out front now, Greg Erie. He is former FBI Domestic Terror Operations Section Chief, now the Vice President of Law Enforcement and Analysis at the Anti-Defamation League, which tracks extremist groups. And Donnie O'Sullivan, who has been closely covering the QAnon movement. You just saw him there in some of those sound bites. So, Greg, let me just start off with you. What is the biggest concern for you about these domestic extremists? Because that's what they are.
Well, Aaron, first, thank you for having me. And Josh encapsulated it very well. We're watching these movements change in front of our eyes, and it's happening at a speed that we haven't seen before in all my years working domestic terrorism. With QAnon in particular, what we're seeing is what I will call a failed ideology. Everything they predicted did not happen. The truth became known. And now they're desperate in some ways to keep this ideology moving. What that does is make two different danger levels. One, and the FBI is warning about both of these, is this rhetoric, this increased rhetoric online. Does that resonate with somebody and influence them to become a lone actor in order to do something, commit a violent act? But more importantly, and what we've seen with QAnon specifically, but other ideologies, this justification, these actors who have this violence in mind, use these ideologies as a justification to commit an act. That's what the FBI is warning about, and it is a real concern.
So, Donnie, a recent study found about a quarter of Republicans, 23%, so this is stunning, there's a quarter of Republicans in the entire United States of America agree with beliefs linked to QAnon. According to the FBI report, people's willingness to believe in QAnon is affected by a lot of things. But one of those things is, quote, the frequency and content of pro-QAnon statements by public individuals who feature prominently in core QAnon narratives. Now, obviously, that could be more than one person, but the predominant person that would refer to would be the former president, right? A public official who features prominently in core QAnon narratives. And he's out there still saying it was fraud and he won and the whole thing was rigged. I mean, he's saying it every day he can. He's still putting out statements to that effect. So how closely are people listening to him, Donnie?
Oh, they're hanging on his every word, Aaron. And, I think when we talk about QAnon, a core tenet of QAnon is this belief in the pedophile ring, etc. But really, what this is all about right now, and I think what the threat right now is about, it's about the big lie. It's about the election. QAnon believers, talk is less about the ring of pedophiles and Satanists, and it's more about the election being stolen, and they are being told that every single day by certain segments of the media and, of course, by the former president. And look, it can be difficult to try and put yourself in the shoes of a QAnon believer, but some people genuinely believe this stuff. Yep. And if you believe that your democracy, that American democracy has been stolen from you, then you can see it's not too many jumps to justify violence.
So, Greg, how difficult is this for the FBI? When you have this, you have it growing at a speed you say we've never seen before. And yet there is no kind of technical public leader or form to the movement. It's not like Al-Qaeda, for example, where there were leaders, right? You could identify them and that would help you build out who to look for. That does not exist here.
That's correct. And this is not what we would call a traditional investigation into an organization or group, as you referred to, say, an organized crime group or a drug cartel with a set structure. That's difficult. This is an amorphous group. There's no leadership structure. These are people who are just, in some ways, taking their own instructions or going online to look for some kind of direction. And the FBI is doing what they do best. But as Director Wray has mentioned, just because you believe in this ideology or you're a member of QAnon does not make you open to or predicate you for an investigation. What they have to look for is that needle in that stack of needles, is who amongst this group who believes in this ideology is planning to commit a federal crime or a violent act. It's very difficult, but the Bureau is very good at it.
It is Tuesday, the 15th of June of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Oh, just as a reminder, if you have the more rare Spanish kind, it's a bit more expensive than the Hungarian hot smoked paprika. If you happen to have the Spanish kind, go ahead and use it, because I got to tell you, it's equal, not better. It is equal to the Hungarian hot smoked paprika. There's just a lot less of the Spanish kind. Anyway, we are at Tuesday already. Wow, Monday went by pretty quick, did it? Anyway, what news is there in the world again today? You would think that the 4 years that we were subjected to Trump, that maybe, just maybe, the news cycle would slow down just a little bit. And it has. I mean, granted. It's just that the resonance of that movement resonates still. Yeah, they're banging along, banging that gong. They keep banging that gong, and it's like resonating off the hills of, the shiny mansion on the hill. And the city, too. So much for Ray Gunn. Is he rolling in his grave? I don't know. Does anybody roll in their grave? I don't know. I think that we would consider the possibility that everything is exactly ass backwards than what the founders really wanted, right down to the party system. Didn't they warn us what parties would do? Isn't this exactly what they warned us would happen if parties in a representative democracy were able to wield the kind of power that it has? Because one that refuses to, well, shall we say, live by societal norms, of goodwill. You'll have a tyranny. There's no goodwill in a tyranny. Okay, and for some reason, it's turned around that if you help somebody up, somebody falls down and you help them up, you are a criminal because, well, you're not being selfish enough now, are you? If you're living in a selfish society and you express empathy, you're a criminal. If you think in a representative democracy, the only way that can work is that an informed electorate votes, that's a crime. We don't want people voting. There's no democracy in a tyranny. What are you talking about? I guess tyrannies are like business. I guess. Okay. Enough of all of that stuff. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene out there apologizing for, well, she went to the Holocaust Museum and goes, it's really bad. I knew it was bad before, but I didn't know how bad. Well, she didn't know how bad it was until her numbers tanked. And certain types of officials said, look, Marjorie, the only reason that we're against the 1619 Project and critical race theory is that we believe every bit of the Turner Diaries, but we can't go out there and tell everybody right now. Okay, can you just tone it down? And normally Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Burbert would say, screw you, I'm going to say whatever I want to say. But I think that they've been in the elected process for a bit, and they're seeing the sausage making. And I think they realize, oh, wow, maybe we shouldn't say the bad out loud just yet. And so, anyway, don't go by what they say, go by what they do. And when they say something, believe it the first time. Okay? Marjorie Taylor Greene is an anti-Semitic Nazi. There, I got it out. And that's not a joke. We might joke around about it, but that is not a joke. And we all know that. Well, Greg Abbott is on to the road of success for a really hot summer. Oh, yeah, you thought it was bad when you were all freezing to death in the wintertime when your electricity went out. And Ted Cruz took off to Cancun. Guess what's going to happen now? And we have a story actually starting off in the Bistro Cafe of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today about how hot it's going to be. There's a heat wave already, the first one. So, see what it's going to be like during, triple-digit weather, and there's no moving air in your domicile. We're not talking even air conditioning. We're talking about just a fan. So I presume, is Ted going to go to Cancun? Because it might be too hot there. Maybe he needs to go to cooler climes like maybe Alberta. Calgary. He'll go to Calgary. Isn't he from there? Yes. Okay. I thought Article 14 of the Constitution said that you can't be a senator or a House of Representative member if you've ever taken part in a sedition or an insurrection against the United States of America. Are we still in the investigative phase? I mean, are we ever going to get a court trial? I suppose it would be within the auspices of the Congress and the Senate. But are we ever going to have that so we can, sentence these traitors to not being able to be in office at least? I doubt it, because they, for some reason, wield some ungodly power where their lesser numbers overturn the majority numbers. We just cannot get enough of a majority, even though we're the majority. And as soon as they're the majority, even by one, They'll just ram through whatever it is they want. Thank you, Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper of the graveyard where democracy goes to die. He is still at work. He has promised to steal another SCOTUS position. Another SCOTUS seat. There, I got it out. He has promised. And we're supposed to look for bipartisan with that? Well, it is bipartisan, but with Mitch, he's going to be bought off as B-U-Y, partisan there. There. And Merrick Garland, he was a judge, not a prosecutor. Okay? Maybe sometimes the Attorney General needs to have some prosecutorial experience. I think good old Merrick is maybe too good for our own good. I don't want to blame him because he's just trying to follow the rules. But, it's sometimes good to know the rules so that you can play the chess match that's being played by these bad actors. And I don't know, maybe Merrick just doesn't see what's coming. Maybe he believes that truly in his heart, he may believe that people can't be that bad. Not in America. They've risen to a certain level of prominence. How could they be bad? Well, sometimes people are raised to prominence because they are bad. Clawed their way on the way up. All the way up. And it didn't matter who they hurt and the damage done by their actions. That is human nature. Just because someone has a bunch of money doesn't mean they're imbued with the goodness of grace. Or that they have the secret of the universe. I used to hear that a lot. Oh yeah, if you're getting money, you're like tied into God, and the whole proto-prosperity gospel BS. That your riches are affirmation that you've been blessed. No, it just means that some people are able to part other people with their money. Here, give me your money. Okay, here, have it. I want more. You want more? Okay, have it. So some people can do that, and other people find it a bit gauche, shall we say. Pay me what's fair. I don't need to barter around on this. I learned, obviously, how to negotiate. But it always bugged me. Tell me how much it costs, I'll pay it. You're expecting me to come back with something like I'm going to steal something from you? See, that's the thing that always bothered me. Someone gets a sale or a deal. They think it's a steal. What? I don't want that. If that's stealing, I don't want it. So you have to turn the language around maybe just a tad. The behavior, the connotation. So, yeah, I was able to talk the house seller down on his house. I was able to steal that house from that guy. He doesn't even know it was such a steal. It was priced for a steal. I took good and bad, right and wrong seriously when I was growing up. When I would hear about all this stuff in our economy, that the ability to somehow cause people to part with their goods for less than what was posted, and then everybody called it a steal. I wanted to steal somebody's stuff. No, tell me how much it costs. I'll pay it. It's the right thing to do. Okay, well, I guess that was the little window into the dark recesses of my psychology. I apologize. Alrighty. Why don't we get into what's on the rest of the menu here and get out of this psychodrama and babble? Because it's all psychodrama and babble anyway when we get down to it. Well, at the top, of course, FBI has warned lawmakers that online QAnon conspiracy theorists may carry out, I think they're going to carry out, more acts of violence in the real world, as they're moving from threats and, some bits of violence, because that's what the insurrection was all about. And there's a lot of QAnon people in there. So I I actually posited a question earlier this morning about, are there any former treasonous generals in Antifa calling for a Myanmar-style coup to take over America? Is there? Because I don't get it. But they have all the guns, apparently. And all we have are, like, I don't know, placards and moms with kids. Yeah, the people of the United States. That's us. That's all we got. All right. Well, I guess it was stated that the FBI is really good at finding individual actors who may become the lone wolves of this pack. In fact, they were so good they were able to find Timothy McVeigh before he brought down the Murrah building. Well, maybe they knew about him. I feel better already. Anyway, on the rest of the menu, doctors at Arizona and Nevada burn centers are warning of injuries from contact with superheated asphalt roadways. And that's during the first extreme heat wave of the year that's starting just now. 2 more groups sued Florida over its new restrictive election laws, and not a moment too soon. And the U.S. will give Native Hawaiians surplus land as compensation for acres that were meant for homesteading, but used instead by the federal government. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Britain and Australia agreed on a free trade deal, the first for Britain since it left the European Union. And NATO leaders expanded the use of their all-for-one, one-for-all mutual defense clause to include a collective response to attacks in space. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, across the page, to the left, as I mentioned, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, we're able to throw those dollars that you have Patreoned us with ones that we have collected out of our own wallets, and we throw that into the particle collider, and we're able to stretch those dollars beyond compare. Even on the quantum level, we leave no strange quark unstretched. And because of that ability, scientific though it sounds, through that ability, we are then able to pay our bills. We're able to fly under the radar and continue this resistance against the Nazi takeover of America. And I'm not kidding. No, I'm not. So, thank you for your generosity. We've been doing this for 10 years now, and since it's our 10-year birthday, we're going to keep mentioning it for a while, because, hey, 10 years of 24/7, 365 resistance broadcast radio. Who does that? Anyway, you could say it's on a shoestring, but that's only because on the quantum level, strings and particles exist together somehow. That's what they say. Anyway, thank you. All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity. We do take this quite seriously here at Netroots Radio, even though we joke around a lot. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post, of course, the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on, Twitter and other social media platforms, like Facebook when they allow me to again. Yeah, what's up with Facebook? Oh, well, what do you expect from the moral clarity of a guy who dropped out of Harvard because he militarized a Rate a Babe site? Okay. That's the moral clarity that we just need to be able to run the world. Here we are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, because they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Everywhere. All right. Well, we've got a heat wave. We warned everybody back in the 70s when I remember marching in my little suburban town of Placentia in northern Orange County for the first Earth Day that we as high schoolers, I was 15 at the time, we as high schoolers and, the youth, we had campaigned hard when the Santa Barbara Channel was fouled because of a big oil spill leak, and marine life and waterfowl were dying because they were covered in oil. Well, my parents took us kids, and we were part of, thousands, tens of thousands, if not more, of just regular folk out there on the beach cleaning it up, trying to save as much as we could of that tended to be living animals. Okay. And that had a profound impact upon what it meant to not throw your garbage around and pollute. So we had warned even back then. There had already been studies about a change in the climate. There was the ozone layer. There was a hole in the ozone down around the Arctic, fluorocarbons, hairspray and shaving cream. Anything that was pressurized in a can had a gas. For every action, there's a reaction, right? That gas has to go somewhere. So this all the way back in the 70s and 80s, but no one listened to us. And everything that we said would happen is now happening, and we still have people going, it's a hoax. Yeah, well, you're working for the other side, apparently. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Bob Christie out of the Associated Press. And as far as I know, responsible journalism exists, from recognized, reputable organizations, okay? The other side, what do they have? ON, Newsmax. Oh, yeah, reputable. Doctors who work in Arizona and Nevada burn centers are warning of injuries from contact with superheated roadways and other surfaces as the first extreme heat wave of the year extends across the U.S. West. A high-pressure system is expected to push temperatures above 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're overseas, that's 46 Celsius, okay, parenthetically. And this week in Vegas and Phoenix, health officials advise people to be mindful of hot asphalt, sidewalks, and even desert sand. Well, sand is just glass. Of course it's going to burn and cut the hell out of you. Elsewhere, heat warnings stretched from California's central and inland valleys to as far north as Montana and Wyoming, where predicted highs of 109 degrees today are expected to shatter records. In Denver, parents, kids, and pets cooled off in a popular creek as temperatures hit 96 degrees by mid-afternoon. Those northern states could see relief by midweek, but no such respite is expected for Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and parts of California. National Weather Service excessive heat warnings last through the weekend for those states. The high temperatures will be made worse by a lack of a break in the weather, according to AccuWeather, whose forecasters called it a rare, dangerous, and deadly event. Bobby Kana Calvin of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. 2 more groups sued Florida over its new restrictive election laws yesterday, Monday, adding to a growing chorus of voter rights advocates who say the rules could keep people from casting ballots. The lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court in Tallahassee by the Fair Election Center and the Southern Poverty Law Center on behalf of Headcount and the Harriet Tubman Freedom Fighters. The suit argues that the new law foments distrust against civic organizations that work to register voters by suggesting that residents use the government's website instead. The lawsuit is designed to protect our clients' right to organize through voter registration activities, communicating their message that our democracy works better when all our voices are heard, Michelle Cantor-Cohen, Policy Director and Senior Counsel at the Fair Election Center, said in a statement. Voter registration organizations serve their communities by building trusted relationships with Floridians for whom voting and participation may not otherwise be accessible, she added. At the core of the complaint is a requirement under the law that third-party voter registration groups use specific language to tell all residents who work with them that they might not submit a voter's application documents in a timely fashion. The lawsuit contends that the groups are being forced to provide an inaccurate warning that is self-denigrating, misleading, and contradictory to the mission of the groups. The law, signed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis last month, limits the use of ballot drop boxes, places new restrictions on who can collect completed ballots, and requires identifying information for once routine registration transactions. It also mandates how voting rights groups can operate in the state. DeSantis, a potential Republican contender for the White House in 2024, has helped stoke false claims about Trump's voter fraud. And Florida is facing a raft of lawsuits filed by others. On the same day DeSantis signed the bill, the League of Women Voters, that commie organization of Florida, joined the Black Voters Matter Fund, the Florida Alliance for Retired Americans, and others in assailing the new law in a federal suit. Another suit, filed by the NAACP and Common Cause, alleges the new law targets people who are Black, Latino, or disabled. And last month, the ACLU of Florida sued the state to overturn another elections law that makes it more difficult for voters to change the state constitution. That law establishes a $3,000 limit on individual contributions to groups promoting ballot initiatives. The limit is imposed until a proposal is approved for the ballot. Now, opponents argue that law would have made it nearly impossible to get such issues as medical pot or minimum wage increases on the ballot, and Republicans who backed the initiative argued with a straight face it was needed to keep out-of-state special interest money from influencing the state constitution. Kelleher of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. is giving Native Hawaiians surplus land as compensation for acres that were meant for homesteading, but used instead by the federal government. The land transfer also attempts to help right wrongs against the indigenous people of Hawaii, officials said yesterday, Monday. The 80 acres in Ua Beach, formerly used by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, will eventually provide up to 400 homes while helping fulfill terms of a settlement authorized by Congress in 1995 to compensate Native Hawaiians for 1,500 acres that were set aside for homelands but subsequently acquired and used by the federal government for other purposes. U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland's voice choked with emotion while making the announcement. Yes, it's a happy day, but it's also a sad day because we remember the tragedy that befell the Native Hawaiians throughout their tumultuous history. Said Haaland, the first Native American woman to lead a U.S. cabinet agency. Since that time, she continued, our country has learned a great deal, and now we are in an era where we recognize the importance of healing the generational traumas that caused pain and heartache. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 was meant to provide economic self-sufficiency to Hawaiians by allowing them to use land to live on. Those with at least 50% Hawaiian blood quantum can apply for a 99-year lease for $1 a year. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Nearly 350 years ago, the Dutch scientist Antonie van Leeuwenhoek scraped some white stuff off his teeth, as thick as if it were batter, he wrote, and peered at it under one of his handmade microscopes. What he saw was alive. He described it as many very little living animalcules, very prettily a-moving, the biggest of which shot through the water or spittle like a pike does through the water. What he had discovered in the plaque from his teeth, the animalcules, that was bacteria. And before van Leeuwenhoek's observations of bacteria,
nobody could have discovered bacteria because they didn't have the optical resolution.
Lambert van Eyck is a materials scientist at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands. He says some of van Leeuwenhoek's microscopes could magnify things more than 200 times. And contemporaries like Robert Hooke in England, who'd written a book full of microscopic observations, they were stunned by his findings.
Robert Hooke actually spent quite some effort trying to discover why was Antonie van Leeuwenhoek so skilled and what kind of mysterious ways of producing the lenses made him able to see for the first time bacteria.
But van Leeuwenhoek wasn't eager to reveal the secrets behind the hundreds of microscopes he built.
Some people have explicitly asked him about the lenses, and he never said anything about it. It's still a big mystery how these lenses were made after 350 years. And the only way that they could discover would be to break it open, and then you would obviously see what the lens would be like, but they're too precious.
That's where Lambert van Eyck comes in. He and his colleagues were able to peer inside several of van Leeuwenhoek's microscopes with a non-destructive technique called neutron tomography. It's the same idea as a CT scan, but it uses neutrons instead of X-rays. And what they found surprised them. Instead of using lens types unknown to other scientists of his day, van Leeuwenhoek had just installed a common type of ground and polished lens in one of the microscopes they examined, and in the other, one of his most powerful scopes, he had used a globe-shaped lens produced by flame working, a lens type that his scientific competitor, Robert Hooke himself, had already described.
And so now the ironical thing is that actually, most likely, it's the method of Robert Hooke himself that Antonie van Leeuwenhoek used.
The findings are in the journal Science Advances. Van Eyck points out that van Leeuwenhoek was still an extremely skilled craftsman and glass grinder, able to build the finest microscopes of his day. And his discoveries of blood cells and sperm cells, parasites and bacteria, they were altogether extraordinary. It just seems the types of lenses he used to do that work were anything but. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Die in the electric chair or be killed by a firing squad. It's your choice. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And those really are the options, firing squad or electric chair, if you are on death row in South Carolina, according to a bill just signed into law by that state's governor, Henry McMaster. Technically, lethal injection remains the state's preferred method to kill people, but when lethal injection drugs are not available, then it will be either the electric chair or a firing squad. And lethal injection drugs have not been available in South Carolina for over a decade because pharmaceutical companies have been insisting that their drugs be used to help people, not kill them. So, South Carolina needed a plan B if it were to crank up anew its machinery of death. A number of legislators voted against the bill because they said that having recently outlawed most abortions on the basis of the sanctity of life, they could not vote to intentionally kill human beings. That argument lost. One proposed amendment would have allowed live streaming of executions so that people could see what was being done in their name. That proposal lost. Another proposal would have required lawmakers to attend the executions they have demanded and authorized to see their handiwork carried out. That amendment also lost. So, how soon this mistake-prone, racist, arbitrary system of state executions will spring back to life in South Carolina? Well, that's not clear. But, based on the new law, that day is coming. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
While Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. proclaimed, "I have a dream," it was full of lofty ethical stuff like justice for all and, well, it was so 1963. But in today's Facebook, Instagram, Google world of billionaire ethics and expectations, dreams need to glitter with a 2021-ish grandiosity to go viral. So who better to take us there than that visionary of instant gratification, Jeff Bezos? Ever since I was 5 years old, says the mega-billionaire boss man of Amazon, I've dreamed of traveling to space. Now that's intriguing, because Jeff regularly acts like he is from outer space. So is this homeward bound? Bezos can certainly afford the ticket, for today's global pandemic has delivered a financial windfall to him, increasing his personal wealth by $75 billion last year alone. He's retiring as Amazon CEO, but his haul keeps growing as the corporate stock price keeps bloating. Meanwhile, he bought himself a rocket ship company, and in July, he intends to be customer number one on a tourist fling to the lower edge of space. He and 5 other high flyers will take a short suborbital joyride about 50 miles up in a pressurized cabin, then unbuckle and experience weightlessness for about 3 minutes before scooting back to terra firma. Imagine how impressed MLK Jr. would have been by Jeff's commitment of his enormous wealth and potential to such a flighty dream. For his part, the billionaire predicts that his spacecapade will make him a new man. It changes your relationship with humanity, he says of space travel. This is Jim Hightower saying, good, for his relationship heretofore has been one of worker exploitation, tax cheating, and monopoly profiteering. So go forth, Bezos man, and come back a better human.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day anti-union violence erupted in the Valley of Steel. The Little Steel Strike was then in its 20th day. The strike had spread to Bethlehem's Cambria Works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Newspaper headlines screamed, 30 clubbed, stabbed, shot in strike. Guerrilla warfare breaks out anew in Pennsylvania. The day had been marred by hours of fighting with scabs and the police as miners joined picketers in support. Strikers lobbed rocks at scab cars attempting to drive through picket lines and successfully overturned a number of vehicles. Steel-helmeted police attacked strikers, swinging riot clubs and launching tear gas shells. One picketer, Tony Mandos, was in critical condition after having been shot twice by police. Mayor Daniel Shields announced he had deputized 250 special police and was preparing to, quote, raise an army of 3,000 American Legionnaires by nightfall to protect the city of Johnstown from strikers. At Warren, Ohio, dynamite crippled railroad operations at a struck Republic Steel Mill on the Ashtabula-Niles branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad. The explosion came after carloads of raw material had been shunted in and products shipped out of the mill. Auto plants throughout the Midwest slowed production for lack of steel-made parts. UAW President Homer Martin dispatched a telegram to CIO leader John L. Lewis saying, quote, we are standing by ready to refuse to use steel made in struck plants in the production of automobiles, unless the steel companies make a speedy and amicable settlement with the striking steelworkers. The CIO threatened a 20,000-strong strike support rally through the streets of Johnstown to protest the violence. They claimed victory when the governor quickly declared martial law and padlocked the gates of the Cambria Works.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-70s, nearly the same as yesterday. A mix of clouds and sun with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight with lows in the low 50s. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And sunny skies tomorrow with highs inching up to 86 with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon stands now at 11,420 with 146 confirmed deceased. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 28 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at 9. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.17 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 76 and partly cloudy. Paris is 85 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Kabul is 74 fair, but very windy. I don't know how that's fair, but it is. Hong Kong is 81 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 54 and fair. San Francisco, California is 55 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is a very pleasant 74 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Danica Kirka and Rod McGurk of the Associated Press bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Britain and Australia announced the broad outlines of a free trade deal today, eliminating tariffs on a wide range of goods as the UK seeks to expand links around the world following its exit from the EU. The pact is expected to boost exports of traditional British products such as Scotch whisky, while boosting imports of lamb and wine from Australia. Crucially for Britain, it will also reduce barriers to trade in financial and other services. The UK hopes the deal will help it join the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, which would open the door to increase trade throughout the Asia-Pacific region. It is the first trade deal Britain has negotiated from scratch since it left the EU. Earlier deals with countries, including Japan and Canada, were built on existing agreements struck by the EU.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Lauren Cook of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. NATO leaders expanded the use of their all-for-one, one-for-all mutual defense clause to include a collective response to attacks in space. Article 5 of NATO's founding treaty states that an attack on any one of the 30 allies will be considered an attack on them all. Until now, it's only applied to more traditional military attacks on land, sea, or in the air, and more recently, in cyberspace. In a summit statement, the leaders said they consider that attacks to, from, or within space could be a challenge to NATO that threatens national and Euro-Atlantic prosperity, security, and stability, and could be as harmful to modern societies as a conventional attack. Such attacks could lead to the invocation of Article 5. A decision as to when such attacks would lead to the invocation of Article 5 would be taken by the North Atlantic Council on a case-by-case basis, they said. Around 2,000 satellites orbit the Earth, over half operated by NATO countries, ensuring everything from mobile phone and banking services to weather forecasts. Military commanders rely on some of them to navigate, communicate, share intelligence, and detect missile launches. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.